Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Thank you so much for being here. It's part 12 of the Women in the Bible series. It's been far too long. I did not expect so much time to go by since the last time we were here for part 11, but I had to get a few other videos out. I've been doing a lot of sewing and working on some things that I wanted to get out, and time kind of got away from me a little bit. I'm wearing a dress. Actually, this is a mock-up of a dress that I'm working on. That video will be coming out shortly, but I just had this on and I'm like, let me just wear this for the video. But I made this out of a sheet just to give me an idea of the fitting for the dress that I'm really going to be making. So again, this is a mock-up. It's not even finished. The neckline is still the rough edge. I didn't complete it, but it showed me what the dress was going to look like, and stay tuned for that if you're interested. So part 12, I'm still in the Gospels. All the women that I'm going to be talking about today conclude in the book of John. So the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, have been completed by the time this video ends, and the next one will be the remaining women. I think I can get through the remaining women through the rest of the New Testament, and then that should be the last video before I talk about Eve. So technically there could be 2 or 3 more videos in this series. So I'm very happy to know that some people are interested in this. I know there's probably like an average of 40 people so far that watched this series, but I have gotten some positive feedback. So if you do enjoy this content, then I am very happy to provide it, and I'm very happy that you are watching and enjoying it. So thank you, thank you, thank you for watching, supporting, and I appreciate the fact that you are interested in this topic, because I love talking about this. I love these types of videos. I like to make these, and it's just all around good for me and for you. I'm gonna just go right in. I talked about Mary, Jesus's mother, in the previous video in part 11, but there were some other parts that I didn't cover because I kind of was in the books of Matthew and Mark in part 11, and now I'll be talking more so from the books of Luke and John. So the accounts are different, of course, in different books. So because Mary had her firstborn child was a boy, the law of the Lord said that her and Joseph needed to present him to the Lord and offer sacrifice. So they went to the temple. Mary and Joseph took Jesus to the temple, and there they sacrificed 2 turtle doves and 2 pigeons, and basically dedicated or gave Jesus to the Lord in that way. And they did this in Jerusalem. And now there was a woman named Anna. She was a prophetess. She was older. She was married to her husband for about 7 years, and then he passed away. She continued living as a widow until she was about 84 years old. She would stay in the temple day and night, and she would stay there worshiping the Lord, praying and fasting. And so there was a devout man in the land. His name was Simeon. He was righteous and devout, and he was eagerly waiting for the Messiah to come and rescue Israel. So the Spirit of the Lord led Simeon to the temple on the day that Mary and Joseph were there with Jesus, and it was so that they could meet up, to show Simeon, like, the Messiah is here, this is him. And when Simeon saw Jesus, he took him in his arms. Simeon took Jesus from the parents into his arms, and he praised God. And he started to just talk about Jesus and say that he would cause many in Israel to fall, but he would bring great joy to many other people in Israel. Simeon confirmed that Jesus had been sent by God, but that many would oppose him. And he also confirmed that Jesus would cause the deepest thoughts that were in the hearts of many of the people to be revealed, and that the sword would pierce his soul. And these are all things that are mentioned in the book of Luke. And then Anna, the prophetess, came around when Simeon was speaking with Mary and Joseph, and she was very excited about Jesus herself, and she went there and she praised God. And Anna talked about Jesus to everyone who had been waiting for God to come and rescue Jerusalem, to let them know that God sent his son Jesus, and just talked about him everywhere to everybody. And we know that Jesus performed many miracles. I talked about a few of them that were related to women in part 11. But there was a funeral procession when Jesus was out and about. he came across this funeral procession that was in the village of, I believe it was Nain, and there was a widow whose only son had died, and Jesus's heart was overwhelmed with compassion for this woman. When he saw her, he told her, "Weep not." And then he went over to the casket and touched it and told the boy, "Young man, arise." And the boy sat up and started talking, and then Jesus presented him to his mother. And then there was a Pharisee that invited Jesus to his home for a meal, and the Pharisee ended up being Simon. He invited Jesus over, and there was a sinner woman who heard that Jesus was going to be there, and somehow she was at Simon's house. It's not really clear how she got in, how she was invited in, but she definitely came in. And the woman was a sinner in the town. And while Jesus was having his meal, the woman was at his feet, crying over his feet. Her tears were basically washing his feet. Her hair must have been very long, so it was hanging over, and she was using her hair to dry his feet. She also had some expensive perfume that she was using to anoint Jesus's feet with. And Simon, looking on, judged this woman, and he said to himself, he's like, well, if Jesus were a prophet, surely he would know what kind of woman this is, a sinner. And Jesus rebuked him openly, understanding what he was saying within himself, and gave him a parable and offered up this little story to help him to come to an understanding about certain things. And in the story, a man had loaned 500 pieces of silver to one person and 50 pieces of silver to another person, and both could not pay it back. And so the man forgave the loan. And Jesus asked Simon, so if one person owed 500 pieces and the other owed 50, which one of them would have been the most appreciative or the most grateful? Or who loved the guy more for offering that forgiveness? And Simon said that the man who had the greater debt would have loved the man more. And Jesus confirmed, yes, you are correct. And so he pointed out, well, this woman here, since I came here with dusty feet, because, you know, people were wearing sandals back then and walking in the dust and the dirt, Simon apparently hadn't offered Jesus anyway to clean his feet. And so Jesus pointed out, you didn't offer me any means to clean my feet, but since I've gotten here, she's been crying over my feet and basically washing them and then drying them with her hair. And then Jesus said, you greeted me with a kiss, but this woman has not stopped kissing my feet since I arrived. And then Jesus also said, when I came here, you didn't anoint my head with any olive oils, but this woman is using this rare and precious, expensive perfume to anoint my feet. And Jesus told Simon, her sins, which are many, are forgiven, for she loved much. To whom little is forgiven, the same loveth little, according to the King James Version. Jesus told the woman, your sins are forgiven, your faith has saved you, go in peace. Another person that was healed by Jesus was a woman who was bent over for 18 years. She couldn't stand up straight. And one day when Jesus was teaching in the synagogue, he saw this woman. He called her over and he said, dear woman, you are healed of your sickness. And then he touched her and she was able to stand up straight. And then there was a wedding in Cana. I know a lot of people are familiar with this story where Jesus turned water into wine. So towards the end of the wedding feast, the wine had ran out, and Mary went and told Jesus, there's no more wine. And Jesus told her, my time has not yet come. And basically, that's not my problem. But he solved the problem anyway. So Jesus got the servants together because he was going to use them to resolve this situation. So Mary told the servants, do whatever he tells you to do. And so Jesus told the servants to get these 6 water jars. They could hold about 20 to 30 gallons of liquid. And these were the jars that they used for the ceremonial washing. So I think the people who came to the wedding feast would use these jars to wash in before the ceremony started. These were like bathtubs almost. And Jesus told them to fill the jars with water, and he turned that water into wine. And they presented it to the host, and nobody told them where the water came from or where the wine came from or what it was like made in. And so the host was very happy with the wine. He confirmed it was the best wine. And he praised the bridegroom because most of the time people bring out their best wine at the beginning of the wedding, and then when everybody's all tipsy or whatever, feeling the wine and don't even realize what's going on, they just serve them anything, because at that point they don't even realize what they're drinking. But this time they had saved the best for last. And this miraculous event was the first time that Jesus had revealed his glory. And then after the wedding, Jesus, Mary, his mother, his brothers, and his disciples went to Capernaum for a few days. And then Jesus used a woman in these two parables where he was trying to emphasize a point. And he was talking about the lost coin and how joyous of a time that is when a sinner comes to Christ, turns their life around and is no longer a sinner. And he used this woman's story about having 10 coins. So a woman who has 10 coins and loses one, won't she search all over her house, sweep the house, turn on lights, light lamps, and do all these things to find the coin? And when she does find it, she'll invite her friends over to celebrate. And that's likened to a sinner who comes to God and, repents and turns from sin. It's a celebration of what was lost having been found. And then Jesus told a story about a persistent woman who went before an unjust judge. Now, this was an unjust man. He did not fear God, but because this woman was persistent in trying to get justice from her enemies, the judge decided to hear her, because she would constantly come back repeatedly and ask for justice. And the judge said even to himself, I don't fear God, I don't care about people, but because this woman is annoying me, I'm going to give her the justice that she is looking for. She was wearing him down. And Jesus's point was, if this unjust judge can render a just decision, how much more would God do the same for his people if they are persistent in seeking him and coming to him with what their needs are? God will give justice to his chosen people who are crying out to him day and night, just staying before the Lord in consistent prayer and being persistent in what your needs are. Okay, so another situation about noontime, Jesus and his disciples were together. His disciples went off to go buy food, and Jesus was there near a well. And this was Jacob's well. And Jesus was just resting there. So the woman, a Samaritan woman, came up and she went to draw water from the well. And Jesus asked her to give him some water. And the woman was surprised because usually the Jews and the Samaritans didn't have any dealings with each other. So she said to him, I'm a Samaritan woman. Surely you don't really realize who you're talking to, because you shouldn't really be talking to me. Jews did not like Samaritans. And she asked him, why are you asking me for a drink, given the circumstances? And Jesus told her, if you knew the gift that God has for you, who you were speaking to, who asked this of you, you would be asking me for a drink, and I would have given you living water. And she was asking, where are you going to get this living water from? How are you saying that you're better than Jacob, who gave us this well? Your water is better than the water that is in this well. Everything she was thinking, of course, was comparing in the natural. And of course, Jesus was speaking in the spiritual. And so Jesus stopped her there and he said, if you drink of this water from this well, you'll be thirsty again. But if you drink of the living water that I'm offering, you will never thirst again. And then the woman asked for this living water. Who wouldn't? And so Jesus told her, go get your husband. And she said, I don't have a husband. And he was like, you're right, because you've had 5. And the man that you're living with now isn't even your husband. So right then and there, based on that comment, the woman said, you must be a prophet. And then she starts to ask him questions about the differences in the places of worship between the Jews and the Samaritans. And Jesus let her know the time is coming where none of that is even going to matter. That's not even important. And Jesus went on to say that the Samaritans know very little about the one that they worship, but the Jews know all about him, because salvation will be coming through the Jews to all the world, all mankind. He also said that true worshipers have to worship the Lord in spirit and in truth, because God looks for people who will worship him in that way. God is a spirit, and those who worship him must worship him in spirit and in truth. So when Jesus is speaking to this woman, he's telling her all of that. And so the woman tells Jesus, I know the Messiah is coming, and when he does come, he will explain everything. And Jesus said, I am the Messiah. And then at that point, the disciples came back from what they were doing, purchasing food or whatever, and they were shocked to find Jesus talking to this Samaritan woman, but they didn't question him. And then the woman left her water jug that she was drawing water. She left it right there, and she ran back to the village and told all the people all around, like, come see this man who told me everything about me, everything that I ever did. And so the people came, they came to see Jesus, and they said that because of what the woman said, they were believing Jesus, and they asked him to stay for a while. So he stayed for, I think, about 2 days. And while Jesus was there for those couple of days, he was teaching. And so they said, well, we believed initially because of the things that she said, but then they started to believe based on Jesus himself and the things that they learned about him. Also from his teachings, they understood that he was the Savior of the world. And so one day when Jesus was in the temple teaching, the Pharisees and the religious leaders brought before him a woman who had been caught in adultery. Apparently she was caught in the act. They wanted Jesus to serve justice upon this woman, basically saying the law of Moses says that she's to be stoned. So what do you think? What are we going to do? And then Jesus he leans down and starts writing in the sand or the dust with his finger. We don't know what he was writing. I don't see that confirmed anywhere, but he's writing in the sand with his finger. And they demanded an answer. They were trying to trap him into saying something that they could use against him. So he stood up and he said, let he who is without sin, who has never sinned, throw the first stone at this woman. And then Jesus went back to writing in the sand, leaned down and was just writing in the dust with his finger. And as he was doing that, the accusers started to just drift away until it was just Jesus and the woman in the middle of the crowd. And so Jesus stood up and he said to the woman, where are your accusers? He said, didn't even one of them condemn you? And she said, no. And then he said, well, neither do I. Go and sin no more. And next, we're talking about Mary and Martha. Now, this is Mary of Bethany. Her and Martha, I believe, are sisters. They lived together with their brother Lazarus. And Lazarus was sick at a certain time. Jesus was not with them at this time. They were apart from him. And Lazarus was sick. And they sent message to Jesus to tell him, your dear friend Lazarus is sick. And I guess they expected that he was going to drop everything and rush over there and heal him. But Jesus didn't do that. He said, this situation is going to be for God's glory. He said the sickness would not end in death. So he stayed where he was for a couple of more days, I think about 2 more days. And so then Jesus decides now him and his disciples are going to go and see about Lazarus. And he said that Lazarus is asleep and he's going to go wake him up. And they, of course, thought that Lazarus was naturally just regularly sleeping. But then Jesus let them know, no, he died. And I'm glad I wasn't there. Because, of course, if he was there, they would have expected that he would have healed him. But he was glad he wasn't there because this was going to be God's way of revealing even more, another miracle, even more of an example of, who he is. And it would cause even more people to believe in him. And by the time Jesus arrived, Lazarus had been dead for 4 days. So Martha heard that Jesus was on the way, so she went out to meet him. And she's crying. She's like, if you were here, this would not have happened. My brother would not have died. So basically saying, when we first told you the message, you could have come and you didn't. So had you been here, you would have been able to prevent him from dying. And Martha went out to meet Jesus, but Mary didn't. So people from the town had come over to console them. So when Martha came out, I guess she came out, far enough away. And the people who had come to console them were still in the house with Mary because she didn't come out. But even though Martha expressed her frustration, she didn't understand who Jesus was. So she says, but God will hear whatever you say. God will give you whatever you ask for, almost as if to say, you can ask for him to be raised from the dead and God will grant that. And then Jesus said, well, he will rise again. And Martha said, yes, I do understand that he will. But she thought that he was referring to in the last day, at the resurrection of all the dead, at the time of the rapture, when Jesus comes back to catch away his people and all the dead in Christ who would rise first. She thought he meant that resurrection, but he let her know, no, Jesus said, I am the resurrection and the life. Anybody that believes in him will live again even after dying. If you believe in him and you live in him, you will never die, technically, because if you're living on this earth and then you cease to exist, you are still living because you're in Christ, so you're still alive. Jesus asked Martha if she believed that, and she was like, oh yes, definitely. I've always believed that you are the Messiah, you are the Son of God, you are sent by God. So then Martha goes in the house and she gets Mary. She calls her to the side and she's like, Jesus is here, the teacher is here, and he wants to see you. And now, so Mary goes out to go see Jesus, and all the mourners come out and follow her. And when Mary sees Jesus, she drops to his feet and she says the same thing that Martha says. Had you been here, my brother would not have died. And so Jesus is seeing her crying, seeing all the mourners crying, and he gets upset. He gets angry and he asks them, where is he? Show me where you've put Lazarus. And people were questioning, like, well, he healed blind people. Surely he could have prevented Lazarus from dying. So they bring him to the tomb. Jesus asks for the stone to be rolled away. Martha's like, well, he's been dead for 4 days. The smell is going to be terrible. And Jesus is like, well, didn't I tell you that you would see God's glory if you believe? And then Jesus prayed to God and basically said, I said everything out loud because I wanted everybody to hear exactly what was going on, and that it is God that's going to be raising him from the dead, and he's going to use Jesus to do it. Jesus wanted to make sure that the people believed that God sent him, and this was going to be a great miracle that was going to prove that. So he stood there and he said, Lazarus, come forth. And then Lazarus came out. He was bound, his hands and feet were tied up with the burial clothes, and his head and face were all wrapped up. But he was alive again. And then one day when Jesus and his disciples were on their way to Jerusalem, Martha, this is later now, Martha came out and invited Jesus and the disciples to her house, and she prepared a meal for them. While they were there, Martha is in the kitchen, cooking, getting everything ready. Mary, on the other hand, was sitting at Jesus' feet listening to him teach. And Martha got a little attitude and she's like, I'm in here cooking and trying to handle the dinner and do everything, and Mary isn't helping me. Martha goes to Jesus and she's like,
doesn't it seem unfair that I'm in here doing all the work and Mary is not helping me?
And she tells Jesus to tell Mary to come help me. And Jesus is like, no, I'm not going to do that. Mary has chosen the better part because you're worried about the fine details that are not important, and Mary has chosen what is important, his teachings. And then 6 days before the Passover celebration, Jesus went to Lazarus's home, and Lazarus and Martha and Mary all lived together. And Martha once again served the dinner, and the dinner was in honor of Jesus. And Mary, of course, Martha's sister, not Jesus' mother, but the other Mary, she took 12 ounces of some expensive perfume and she anointed Jesus' feet with it, and she dried it with her hair. And Judas, one of the disciples, the one that turned on Jesus and sold him out, he saw what was going on and he got upset because he was a thief himself, but he was mad because he's like, well, this is some expensive perfume. We could have sold this and given the money to the poor. Who knows if that was his real intention or was he looking to pocket it himself, but he was upset because of how the perfume was being used. And Jesus told Judas to leave her alone. Jesus basically, rebuked Judas and let him know, this ointment is preparing me for my burial, and she's doing a good thing. And he's like, the poor are always going to be with you. You're always going to be taking care of them, but I'm not going to always be with you. And in Luke chapter 8, there is in the Bible, there's the commentary or whoever has put like a header on some of the paragraphs, and one of the headers in the King James Version literally says certain women. So there were certain women who used their own resources to support Jesus and his disciples, and those women were noted to be women who had been healed of evil spirits and other infirmities. And so Mary Magdalene was named, who had 7 devils or demons cast out of her, Joanna and Susanna, and then there were many others, but these 3 were named in that paragraph under certain women who, once they got to know Jesus and the disciples, they stuck with them. And that is all for part 12. I hope you enjoyed, and if you did, please give the video a thumbs up. Leave me a comment below, ask me any questions. Thank you so much, and stay tuned for part 13. So I'll see you next time.